Imagine that in the Meriwether Academy, you didn't let in the best and the brightest men you can find, but you let in just any random person walking down the street. Maybe you even insisted that they come join you at the table. Okay, now let's say that, let's be very kind and say 85% or however many percent, I don't know, of the people that you meet are going to be decent. But it's probable that if they begin to outnumber you, they'll drag down the quality of your conversation, unless you rule them with an iron fist. So that's always possible. The dictatorial response is always possible, which is why Strauss worried that an open society globally would culminate in a global dictatorship or global tyranny. But that's in some sense the concern that, as you mix the high, which is relatively rare, with the low, which is relatively common, you're going to dilute things. You're going to just dilute things too far. Now, Strauss did not believe, let me put it this way. In recapitulating the teaching of the ancients for us, Strauss said that they hold that the best solution is a compromise, yes, between the wise and the unwise. So he did not think that the classical teaching actually supported practically the absolute tyranny of the wise, or the absolute, what's called the absolute rule of the wise, okay, the absolute kingship of the wise. Rather, it has to make some sort of compromise with the unwise. But there's a very specific way that it does that, as you saw, which is through the establishment of a fundamental, foundational code of law, like, a declaration and a constitution, something that sets the guidelines for the country for hopefully as long as possible, even after the great founding generation has passed away, so that it no longer depends on the continued existence of the great founders, since after all, they only have a lifetime. But they can leave you a wise document for a long time, and that wise document should provide guidance and rule somehow indirectly over the course of affairs. So Strauss was very worried about the open society. There are other places where he analyzed it and made predictions about what it would do. Those passages are pretty amazing and also prescient and I think just true from top to bottom. But, the idea that a global society will be ruled by an unwise tyrant somehow can be deduced, which he discusses in the book on tyranny. But yeah, that's the problem. So he says, again, characterizing the classic teaching. And Strauss does say that in the edition I have, which is the 7th edition. I don't know if he says this in every edition. But he says, nothing that I have learned has shaken my inclination to prefer natural right, especially in its classic form, to the reigning relativism, et cetera, et cetera. So Strauss prefers this view that I'm telling you, but it's also true that we sometimes have to separate his characterization and his actual opinion, okay? So yeah, when he characterizes the open society, he says for the classics, it's unnatural. The natural thing is for people to be grouped together, not for racial reasons, as you saw, but by the requirements of intelligent political life. If you analyze what a political society is and what a political community is and what its requirements are and when it's good and when it's bad, when it's just and when it's unjust, and you use your basic experience as a human being who has lived alongside others, then you recognize that it's better, all things being equal, for you to know who you're dealing with. And you can't do that if you've got infinite number of people in an infinitely big space, or let's call it, right, the whole world's population in the whole globe. So the classics thought closed societies were the better answer. It's not that they never let anybody in. It's not that they had complete hostility to strangers and so on. That's what's required to keep a good legal order and a well-run commonwealth in their judgment.